All right, good afternoon. It's April 30th, 2024 at 2 p.m. We're meeting with PBA for contract openers. I'm Nikki Powell, Interim HR Director.
West Moreno County Administrator.
Debbie Bauer, Assistant County Administrator.
Janice Floyd, Interim Deputy Director, Human Resources.
Rich Powell, Chief of Corrections.
Scott Nash, State County Jail Commander.
Floyd Dipple, Corrections.
David Allen, RCO.
Noel Pillay, CO.
James Bush, CO.
Dustin Harazine, Corrections.
John Christopherson, PBA. Chase Horn, PBA.
Jason Santos, Corrections.
Bonnie Wilson, correct.
And Kristen.
I am Kristen Buell from County Attorney's Office.
Alright.
So I guess we're here for our opener. And we don't really have anything to pass across. We just want to see what you guys have on your mind and see how we can start.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you prefer if I hand them all over and then we can just run through them, or do one at a time? How do you prefer?
Hand them all over.
Do you have electronic copy that I can send you?
I can send it to you after this because I don't have it. Give me a minute.
I can send you. If you tell me where email is.
Yeah,
If
thank
you
you.
just send it to me, I'll get it over to Kristen. I wish you could follow along.
There we go. What is your? This is coming from my personal email. What's your work email?
NL Powell.
Am I?
Yeah, you got it.
Did you get them?
Not yet.
Go ahead and take a minute. 'Cause
Okay. Y'all wanna just kind of go ahead and start? When I get them, I'll shoot them over to Kristen. That way we can have the same time.
No problem. All right. If everyone's got it in front of them. We're looking at Article 3, which is duration and renewal. We've added Section C to it. Basically, the purpose of this is to streamline the process. If we have any terms that are within this contract that need to be clarified or amended, not necessarily altering the contract, but if there's something that we don't necessarily spell out verbatim and we need to figure out what the meaning of certain terms are, or to resolve grievances or disputes, this would allow the parties to do that via an MOA or memorandum of agreement or understanding rather than going through the whole bargaining process and ratification.
Okay.
Next, we're looking at Article 5, which is association rights. The only alteration we've made here, and it's actually something that's already contained in the current contract, is in 5-01, we struck an extra word nor in there, just cleaning up the language. And that is the only change on that one.
513, you have a change?
Correct, 513, we've also increased the amount of union leave from 120 to 180 hours per fiscal year for the union leave pool. I don't know when to go. All set? Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. So Article 6, we looked at the grievance procedure. Throughout the article, it indicates 10 days for each step of the grievance procedure. It doesn't clarify whether that's 10 business days or 10 working days. We've proposed to indicate 15 business days for each step as opposed to 10 kind of ambiguous
So under
days.
601, B, days shall mean calendar days unless otherwise noted. So that's
Yeah.
already listed.
Yeah, again, we'd like to make sure that it's in every section, just to maintain,
But then you're
Continuity
changing
there.
it because 601 already
then yeah, then we'd go ahead and change that.
to business days.
Yeah, we can change that to business days. Well, we haven't altered any of the language where it comes to arbitration. It makes sense that if we're going to have everything be business days, then we might as well just do that.
Yeah, because that's where days is defined. So then
Yeah.
it is already defined as calendar days.
Yeah, so we prefer to change that to business days. We've changed it from 10 to 15, and the purpose of that is to allow a longer time for a response and a longer time for both parties to, if we need to, I guess, resolve grievances or for both parties to investigate a grievance. That's kind of the purpose of increasing that amount of time.
Can you say that again, please?
I'm sorry?
The reason why, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we proposed to increase the time to process grievances to allow the agency more time to respond or to resolve grievances, or for the PBA and the agencies to discuss how to resolve those grievances, or in case of grievance that we receive, for us to attempt to resolve it prior to it going any further. I appreciate the question.
I'm just 10 days versus a month. I mean, that just extends that whole thing out drastically. And that was the value of having a 10-day response period is prompt versus a 15 business days. That's now 3+ weeks, depending on where it falls, versus a 10-day response period.
Correct, and the 10 days versus 10 or 15 business days, those are both the maximum. No one's expected that they have to wait that much time. But we would like to, if we can get it within 15 business days without having to go down the steps of the grievance procedure, that would be the goal here, is again to resolve things at the lowest level before they proceed to arbitration.
It's easier for me, I just think, to keep somebody in limbo for a
Sure,
month.
no, and that is appreciated. So for Article 8, rollbacks, layoffs, and recall. Again, we've just removed an extra 2 in 8-02B. There was just some extra language that was a holdover that I don't think was deleted from the previous contract. It was already crossed out in the contract, but it wasn't deleted, so. For Article 10, acting rank, we've removed the language appropriate supervisor and changed that to the chief of corrections. The term appropriate supervisor is a little ambiguous as to who can provide somebody with an acting rank position. We'd like to, we'd like to consolidate that, make it unambiguous, so that if there's any question of who appointed somebody to acting rank, that power rests solely with the Chief of Corrections. Looking at Article 11, down at 11-01C, we've removed the term safety shoe and changed it to equipment. The purpose there is to allow the officers the ability to use that 150 that was originally allotted for safety shoes for other equipment that they may need. An individual may not need to replace their boots every year or every fiscal year, but there is other equipment that they may need. We'd like the ability for them to spend that cash that is in reserves at the time for the boots on other safety equipment that would be subject to approval by the agency. Looking further in Article 11, it's 11-04 on page 2, is Safety Committee. It originally states that the Chief of Corrections Officer shall establish a safety committee comprised of 5 members of the work annex and 5 members of the jail division. It's my understanding that this isn't something that's been done or hasn't necessarily been put into practice. So on the following page, we've put some parameters on that it will be established on a biannual basis. So we could have a committee established every 6 months and have these individuals selected for this safety committee. They would be reviewing suggestions, reports, and complaints of safety issues. Monthly is our proposal that they would meet. And because these are individuals that are placed on this committee by the chief, if they were going to be called in for a mandatory safety meeting to review these suggestions or reports or complaints on a regularly scheduled day off, they would be provided that time as hours worked, or in the case of running over their regular hours, it'd be overtime. Looking at Article 13, leaves of absence. As of right now, it indicates that the sick leave shall be earned by officers at the rate consistent with the other BCC classified employees. We've changed that, and we requested that to be 10 hours per month. The current, I believe, is 8, which is inconsistent with the amount of hours the officers are working.
So I will say that leave is based on an annual number of hours worked, not scheduled shift, so that officers work an annual number of hours equivalent to any other accounting employee.
Okay. We'd be happy to hear a counter on that one, or if it's
Yeah, I know
status
that
quo.
that's a common misconception, so I did want to just point that out because I get that request a lot through union negotiations, specifically for 10-hour employees, but the annual number of hours are equivalent. So that's where that amount, that percentage comes from.
Okay, I appreciate that. So looking at the second,
A 12-hour employee doesn't earn more sick leave than an 8-hour employee.
No, because of your DOR, your hour equivalency is about the same.
But even a 10-hour, we earn 8 hours of sick leave a month.
Correct.
For all
It's based
employees.
on an annual number of
Right.
hours worked.
Correct. But we're just asking for what we had prior to 2013. When we came over to the county, we were getting 10 hours a month, and that's currently what the sheriff's office earns. And that's what we're asking for.
But all county employees get 8, so that's,
But, I mean, that's what we're asking for.
I understand.
10.
yeah, I understand.
all right, so looking at the second page of Article 13, we've indicated in order to encourage and reward the employees who exercise the care and maintenance of their personal health and job attendance, that the BCC would agree to allow any employee having 500 hours of sick leave in his or her anniversary date to convert up to 40 hours of sick leave to annual leave. If the employee's annual leave balance is over the maximum allowed accrual of annual leave, that employee is not eligible to convert the hours unless the total balance is within 40 hours of the maximum allowed under this agreement. Such conversion cannot allow an employee to exceed 500 hours. However, the employee will be able to convert an amount lower than 40 hours to bring them to the maximum of 500. On the following page, section 13-03, we've proposed to increase the accrual for annual leave, it was from 5 to 10 years of service would be 10 hours. We've increased that to 12. 10 to 15 years of service, we've increased that to 14 from 12. 15 to 20 years, we've increased from 14 to 16. And 20 years or more, we've proposed to increase to 18 hours. Now, there was some language in the contract regarding a specific individual, but if we have the contract as proposed with 20 years or more, increasing to 18 hours, then that section would kind of be superfluous. We proposed in 13-03B to increase the maximum amount of annual leave that may be carried over from one anniversary date from 400 to 500 hours. And that the current process is that if that leave in excess of the maximum is not taken, it shall be lost. And we propose to have a buyback as an option for the officers that have actually spent the time and accrued that leave and not been taking it, to actually receive compensation for that. And then the following page, section D, at the BCC's discretion and where funds permit, the officer may elect to sell back up to 100 hours of accrued annual leave prior to the officer's anniversary date. Again, we'd like to allow the employees to have the opportunity to control their leave bank to some extent. That way they have more discretion, and the BCC would have discretion where funds allow to work on staffing issues with the employee rather than have an employee who's hoarding time to save up at one point or they're spending it as soon as they get it. We'd like to have a little more wiggle room on that one to allow for the officer and the agency's discretion. For funeral leave, 13-05, we've proposed to include brother-in-law, sister-in-law, aunt, uncle, aunt-in-law, and uncle-in-law, and remove the word officer's immediate household. As far as the delineation goes, we understand that grandfather, grandmother, but it includes spouses, grandparents, so we believe that things like aunt and uncle, certain other members of the family, there may be funerals that need to be attended to. Continue on to page 7, 13-09, holiday leave. As of right now, the officers who are required to work on designated county holidays will be paid a total of 2 times the regular rate of pay and shall not accrue any holiday leave. We'd like to, again, leave it up to the officer's discretion if possible, that they may receive straight time pay for all hours worked up to 12 1/4 as opposed to 12, because my understanding is that the hours actually being worked is 12 1/4 as opposed to 12 hours.
That quarter of hour goes towards the DOR, so it's part of that calculation. So if you did that, then you're gonna lose that time on your DOR.
Yeah, and so that's something that we could discuss if that was the county's position at some point as a way of tackling that issue. But as of right now, we still have people that are working that extra time, and it seems incongruous with the amount of leave or compensation that they're getting. So that is something that we'd be happy to discuss. Similarly, in B, we've changed from 12 to 12 1/4 hour of holiday pay as opposed to holiday leave, and then moved the language down from this holiday leave will be added to the officer's holiday leave balance, and indicated that an officer's holiday leave balance shall not exceed 160 hours in any fiscal year, and no more than 60 hours may be carried over into the next year at the employee's discretion, and such election must be made no later than August 1st of the calendar year. Substantively, in that section, we've increased the number of hours that may be carried over at the officer's discretion from 40 to 60. In 13-10, requests for leave on page 8, we've modified the language that indicates all leave requests must be requested in writing. We've just substituted language submitted electronically. and shall be approved of or denied electronically. As far as we can tell, there's no overarching reason why it would need to be in writing unless there's something that the county would prefer to keep that way.
We're already using UKG and UCAS.
Yeah, so if we could just get that in here and TA off on that, that'd be fantastic. But really, it just goes to streamline the process. Article 15, personnel records. We've added section E. It just says the BCC will make every effort to notify the officer of a public records request for that officer's personnel file. The officer's personnel file is their property. They already have the ability to review it upon request. They have the opportunity to challenge any negative information that's been put into it. We would like a two-way flow of information. If there's a records request that would indicate that someone's personnel file has been requested, that the officer would be made aware of it. So, Article 17, hours of work and overtime. 17-01A, we've modified it from 12 to 12 and 1/4 hours, again, taking into consideration the county's position on the DOR.
So then you are requesting to eliminate the DOR.
We'd be happy to hear any counter if that's what.
Well,
the
that's
county
what
would be.
basically this says.
Well, we've included the DOR, but we have individuals that are still working that time, and if the county would like to eliminate the DOR and go with that 12 and 1/4, that's something that we would hear. But as of right now, we still have people that are working 12 and 1/4 and not necessarily being paid for it.
Well, they're not, because the 1/4 of an hour goes
It goes
towards
into the DOR. I understand.
Yeah.
So again, just keeping in line with that, we have altered from,
So you want to be, just clarification, you want to be paid for the time and still receive the DOR, is what your request is.
that would be the request. If the county, like, so, and we will get to that. But the provision that we're proposing is to be paid for all hours worked. And again, I understand that the DOR is a provision that's in there right now, and it's something that has been kind of a headache for everybody.
Right,
So
that
we would
1/4
hear-
of an hour, and I could do it on the whiteboard, don't really feel like it, I could do it on the whiteboard for you, but that 1/4 of an hour goes into a calculation of what equals about 8 hours. For the DOR, you have a full 12-hour day off, but you get paid for 8 of it because your hours are the 12, which is like 70-something. Then you add that time to the DOR to get paid an 80-hour week. So that's where the DOR comes in. If we pay you the full time, you have no time to go towards the DOR. Then we're giving you a free day a month that the county's paying for. That's not coming out of your time. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry, Chief, do you have something?
Yeah, I think what you're asking is to be paid what the law says, pay for actual hours work instead of this fictitious process that's going on. I mean, FLSA says pay for actual hours work versus, this tongue in cheek if we've done this. As we know, it is a nightmare for our payroll. Johnny takes a day off, that day isn't taken, that 20.25 is not taken off of that DOI. It is impossible for a supervisor to manage. It's literally, I've got spreadsheets of this failure. I would love to just say, pay for extra hour work overtime with 86 hours. It's just cleaner for everybody. And it's compensatory toward their retirement versus the current process.
But then you would have to remove the DOR.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
which they're requesting to maintain.
That's why we're here to have a conversation.
Yeah, that's why I said I wanted to clarify what the request was.
So the rest of that section of the article, again, as opposed to a 160 hour and a 28-day cycle, it would be 86 hours in a 2-week cycle. that's just keeping consistent with.
It's 85 and some change, OT paid at the 86 hours.
No, I won't challenge your math on that one. So, in 17-02, we've removed the language from A that says for officers assigned to 12-hour shifts, hours worked in excess of the normal scheduled work hours in a work week shall be considered overtime and compensated at time and a half. That's already the law. So if we're going to be altering it, we want people paid for hours worked. Again, we understand the position on the DOR, we understand the nightmare that it's been for people, but we are here to talk about all these issues. We have moved that to section B, just to indicate officers assigned to 12 1/4-hour shifts. Hours worked in excess of the normal scheduled work hours shall be considered overtime and compensated at a time and a half. Again, just clarifying it. Article 19, uniform, equipment, and vehicle. In this article, we're primarily looking at section D. We've again modified the section where it says the VCC will provide a shoe allowance. We'd like to have that be a equipment allowance as opposed to just for shoes or boots. And again, there's going to be situations in which an individual does not need to replace their boots every year, but they may need some other equipment. Now we've also included language that indicates a list of authorized equipment or duty gear available for purchase will be maintained by each facility. The authorized equipment or duty gear will be purchased by the supply manager for each facility. Officers may select items from the list of authorized gear in an amount not to exceed the $150 authorized allowance, in addition to their annual uniform allowance on or before the anniversary date. We understand we can't have people running around with everything they picked up from whatever magazine they picked up. So there has to be a actual uniform list of this stuff. Article 21, salaries. We're proposing that on.
So I want to point out real quickly,
Yes.
we sent out the new pay scale last year. There's no longer steps on the pay scale.
Okay, then we will need to modify what that
Probably.
is. Yeah.
Point that out.
Okay, then we will. Yeah. So, as proposed, it would come out to approximately 6% would be the ask. If that's again, we can come back with other language, but that is the what it boils down to. What the math checks out to would be 6% for the year of 2024 to 2025. Continuing on to 21-02, education, training, incentive pay. In section B, it indicates the classes and training shall include, but not be limited to those set forth in the approved compensatory training list. We've struck the language that says maintained by the Escambia County Human Resources Department and indicated that the list shall be determined by the Chief of Corrections and maintained by ECCD policy and whatever that policy would end
And
up
that's
being.
pretty much already been done, right?
Yeah, we're in right now,
Yeah.
just because we came into some, I'll call it technical issues.
Right, so-
I haven't break my chain of command, so we'll just leave it there.
All right, so the purpose is to streamline the process, make it, so we're all on the same page there. Article 22, promotion procedures. On page 4, under supervisory career path sergeant, which is 22-03, we've crossed out the language that indicates in B, promotion to sergeant from corrections officer shall result in up to 20% pay increase, not to exceed the maximum pay for the grade. corrections officer first class shall result in a pay increase of 15%, not to exceed the maximum. And then it just goes down per rank with less of a raise depending on the step in corrections officer rank. We've proposed to have the promotion to sergeant from corrections officer result in a 20% pay increase, not to exceed the maximum pay grade.
So, just real quick. Wanted to make sure, for your supervisory, were you working off the MOU and not or the MOA and not the current contract? So
Yeah,
it's
because
most
the
updated article.
MOA would be the one that we've all.
That's what I wanted to make, I was trying to
No, absolutely, and that is,
make sure.
by our understanding, the controlling language.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's what I wanted to make sure of.
Again, I just want to throw a precautionary statement in here from this perspective. You have a correctional officer who's been a correctional officer for 20 years, all right? And you've got a fairly new sergeant who's only been a sergeant and then been on the department for 8 years, all right? But they've been a sergeant for 2 years. So they've had that additional responsibility. Based off that statement there, that CO with a 20% bump would be, the pay's going to go in front of somebody who's been working as a sergeant longer. Very possibly, the math may not work out right, and then you got a sergeant who's been a sergeant for 2 years, working in the duties and responsibilities, and you got somebody who's been a CO that hasn't had that responsibility, now wants the responsibility, which I applaud, but maybe making more money than a person who hasn't taken on that responsibility, when you don't consider that. I just want you to caution you, I'm okay with it.
Well, it's the next page.
Oh, okay. Get ahead of myself. Because I've seen it done too many times, and it really, beyond hurts emotions. People take it personal, and that's not intended.
No, we appreciate the insight, Chief. We've also proposed to include a similar career path for sergeants that is implemented for corrections officers. To indicate that a staff sergeant would be a sergeant who has completed the promotion process, subject to the 12-month probationary period that's already in place. A sergeant who's been promoted and completing 7 years of service and has completed 120 hours of approved training, 100 classroom hours may be substituted, and would receive a 5% pay increase from there. Basically, we've created a career path, or proposed to create a career path for sergeants that would hopefully alleviate that what I believe is the compression that you've cited. It would also incentivize individuals to become sergeants and to go for that career path. It incentivizes them to maintain up-to-date and current training and classroom hours. Because as of right now, I'm not aware of any incentive or requirement or beyond mandatory perishable skills that would bring these sergeants to these extra hours of training and classroom, which again, it makes for better sergeants make for better lieutenants. So up as you go. We think that it's a good incentive, but each step up would increase the pay of that sergeant or sergeant first class, master sergeant, first sergeant. Again, title subject to change, however, would increase the pay of that sergeant by 5%. Yeah.
Clarification point. 7 years of service seniority, so 7 years as a sergeant? That's the way I read it, so I want to.
I was reading the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
I was reading the same way.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can be a little less ambiguous with the language, so I'll do a redraft of that.
So you're going to intend to change the language, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we have seniority that was laid out in another one of our MOUs, and I don't have that in front of me, but
I know seniority for supervisors is once they get promoted. That's when their seniority resets. I don't know if that was necessarily the intent.
yeah, so we have to fix that.
It's time of grade, time of class, is the terminology. Time in that class as a sergeant, time in that class as a sergeant, whatever, versus your opener, if you will, sergeant, in that grade or class. The grades as far as the class would be the ranks that you have, like first class, second class, whatever.
Yeah, so we can make that language less ambiguous, so we don't run into that sort of thing. I appreciate the question.
Yeah.
So, if this is something that the agency is open to, we'd also like to propose something similar for lieutenants. But again, because this is our first day and we've got a lot to go over, and the agency will get back to us on what the position would be on that in general. We would like to implement something similar for lieutenants, to have another similar career path for the same reasons set forth for sergeants. It incentivizes more training, more classroom hours, and more seniority for the lieutenants themselves. And then last, we looked at Appendix C, and we've updated the assignment pay for first lieutenants from $300 to $500, and the hourly pay from $1.73 to $2.88.
I think we'll take a quick caucus. I don't think we'll have a lot of answers for you today, but I'll check with everybody, see if we got any other clarification points we need to get before we close for the day. So if that's okay with y'all?
Yeah, perfect.
Did you ever get that book, by the way?
I did. All right, recorder's back on. All right, so I'm gonna run through these real quick, give you a little bit of feedback, we'll agree with them, and then if you guys have any questions or if there was any clarification points that we needed, we'll ask that. So Article 3, we did not call Kristen during our caucus. She's on Teams, so that one I'm gonna run by her.
And we cannot agree to that.
That's kind of what I thought. So.
Well, it's contrary to the Public Employees Relations Act, so.
Yeah. Article 5, I would say that we maintain 120 hours in all of our contracts with the exception of one, so we would like to maintain 120 hours. Article 6, we feel like that really extends it out. We don't have a whole lot of heartache with it. Not ready to sign it today. Obviously, that is a conversation we do want to have with Kristen and with the rest of the team again. We do feel like that really extends the process. On one hand, yeah, it gives us more time, but then if you have somebody in a grievance process for 3 weeks and you gotta pay them or something, it's a lot of money. Article 8 was just your cleanup, so not a problem there. Article 10 was just cleanup, not a problem there. Article 11, we actually wanted to take that out of Article 11 simply because it's already in Article 19, and the duplication kind of bothered some of us, but we're okay with it in 19. So I hope that.
The same verbiage, but just in 19.
Right, and you already have it in 19, so it's just duplicated in 11, which we weren't sure why it was in here twice.
So it's gonna be in there just now.
So
That's
we,
not the intent.
we'd like to maintain that the work annex would have their separate equipment allowance that is at 150 right now.
Is that what the difference is
So-
in the
So
articles?
Article 11 was the work annexes safety shoes for the RCOs. They've got to have steel toe shoes. So that was the purpose of, that's the purpose of it being 11. Is for their safety shoes. But the intent of 19 was to also allow them $150 for other duty gear, belts, holsters, stuff like that, that may not be issued to them. The opportunity to, for both sides, both facilities to have duty gear that we don't provide, allow them, instead of them purchasing it themselves, they buy their own duty belts, instead of them having to buy it.
We'll look at that, we'll talk about it.
That was mostly a clarification on our side, because it was like, it looked like it was duplicated.
Safety shoes.
Safety committee, we were gonna, we'll have a little bit of language that we'll probably send back to you guys to review for the next session.
Okay.
Sick leave, I'm standing by my 8 hours. Jay, we will run an analysis, but we really didn't see an issue with that. Annually, we're standing by the counties, what they have currently. We're gonna run an analysis for the rest of the requests in this article.
When you say stick to the county, are you talking in 1303A or A and B?
A, for sure. B, will run some analysis, but more than likely, we would stick with the county policy because changing it from 400 to 500 greatly increases our liability.
Now-
So we have to talk the budget before we can increase our liability by that much.
But when an employee retires, they're allowed to sell back 500 hours when they retire. So that's-
Only through FRS, through the county, it's 400 hours.
I think we were trying to say he wanted to match. I think that's what he was.
And, we understand that. Well, I understand what the ask is. I'm just
Yes, ma'am.
giving you some feedback.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all. And again, we do have to run that analysis because it does greatly increase our liability.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
if every officer can sell back 500 instead of 400, it's a much bigger liability
Yes,
than
ma'am.
what we currently have. And that would change our liability on the books. So every year, there's an entry done for any accrual liability that the county carries.
Yes.
And we have to maintain that liability every year. So that entry is done
Yes, ma'am.
every year. So that's a kind of a budget question.
I'd have to find the article because it's not in this one, but there is somewhere in the contract that specifies that we're allowed to sell back 500 hours when we retire. That's why
I
we're
think
trying
that-
to get it to match that. I don't have the, I don't have it in
It's
front
on
of me.
upon retirement.
Yeah, we're talking about the holiday and the annual that combines make is 500 hours.
That you can
I
sell
think
back.
that's what-
Just don't have it in front of
So
me.
is the county required to maintain that reserve? If the FRS says that 500 hours is allowed, and the county has a 400 hour maximum at this time, but will allow 500 upon
We
retirement?
have to maintain the reserves, yes.
Okay.
We
That's
project
where the
annually.
liability comes from.
Right. But if the reserve is already there, that the county will maintain.
What we try to do is, when we get to the budget cycle, each department, who do you have that's retiring out this year? Or who do you foresee retiring? And then each department will budget for that event. Is it how it's done? That's how it's, I would try to do it. Every now and then we get called,
Probably works out for the most part.
for the most part.
Yeah, we go as much, are you tend to go and drop, or you going to cash out and go?
Yeah.
I mean, we try to get as much information from all staff as well, so otherwise, we're kind of shooting in the wind.
Yeah, I'm only seeing the 400, so if you find 500,
That's not in this article. I have to find where it's at. I know I've seen it, but
send it to me. Okay, so yeah, do an analysis on there. Article 15, that was something else that I wanted to kind of talk offline with Kristen about, just as far as, going home with it, but then somebody within the county's taking on that liability that, oh, wait, we didn't notify this person that when we're processing public records requests daily, like, lots
No,
of.
and we have included the language every effort, and we understand that that is, it's not something that is set in stone and concrete that, within this amount of time you need to notify, but just that the county will make an effort to do so.
Hours of work and overtime, that's another one we'll run an analysis on. 19, I think we really didn't have an issue with skipping salaries for just a minute. Promotion procedures, Chief and I are gonna set some time aside to go through this and run some analysis. Again, there's a lot of cost analysis that has to go into these requests, and can't do those on the spot.
Of course.
And then I will let.
So, talk about salaries, talk about anything involved with money right now. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're gonna do our best to get a pay adjustment across the county. We have a lot of things, actually a lot of legal fees that we're having to pay, millions and millions of dollars. And we do have a pay adjustment built into the budget. It's not 6%, it's not 4%. wish it was. I'll give everybody 6%. But I'm telling you, it's gonna be tough. Just get in front of you. It's gonna be tough. You guys know me. I love to get pay raises. I try to do my best to help you guys as much as I can. I step in, and I will continue to do that as much as I can. But our budget projection, maybe the ad valorem will be up 6 to 7% more than it was last year. We hope. Last year was 14% above the previous year. So things in the market are leveling out. It does not include new construction. So we're still running numbers, we're still running our budget, working our budget hard. We're going to sit down with each department like we did last year, go through everybody's asks, go through personnel, and we're going to do the best we can. I'm just, again, not trying to be the bearer of bad news. I believe in being open and upfront with you. So, that's what I'm trying to do, be open and upfront. Set expectations. And I hate to end on that. Have any questions? We want to set another day?
Yeah, we'll have to set another day.
And I will say this, I do appreciate the work product. It makes it so much easier to go through and actually be able to read and decipher and talk about and discuss. I do appreciate the work product that y'all brought today.
Thank you.
So, we can coordinate dates offline.
Yeah, we also had Appendix C that we had proposed an amendment to. And again, understanding that it's a money thing, assignment pay for.
I think we had some additional discussion that we were gonna have on that, and
Well, we can discuss dates offline.
okay, yeah. We're gonna coordinate our race schedule.
Thank y'all.
Thank you,
Okay,
Kristen.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Nikki. Next thing we got.
Quick.